Good morning. You know, about a week ago, a blogger who I find her interesting, she wrote a blog for CNN, and it was called Why Millennials Are Leaving the Church. And I'm not sure I fit into the millennial camp, because if I did, I'd probably have this all on iPad and they wouldn't still be using paper, so I don't know. There you go. Here's something that she wrote. She said that young adults perceive evangelical Christianity to be too political, too exclusive, old-fashioned, unconcerned with social justice, and hostile to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. She talks about how young evangelicals often feel they have to choose between their intellectual integrity and their faith, between science and Christianity, between compassion and holiness. And then she also talks about how the evangelical obsession with sex can make Christian living seem like little more than sticking to a list of rules, and how millennials long for faith communities in which they are safe asking tough questions and wrestling with doubt. You know, as I think about her blog, I'm thinking this is probably not news to many of us that this struggle is out there, but probably we feel a little uncomfortable with it still. And for some of us, that discomfort is about feeling like, why is the church always the bad guy? We feel angry about it in some ways. We think, let's see where I'm at. Why is it always they see us as being against things when we know that we are for so many wonderful things? They see us as being against different sexual orientations, and we know that we are for the world and for the amazing truth and grace that Jesus came to bring for us. They see us as being exclusive, and we want to say no. You know, we believe in a God who so loved the world. We want to be a big tent. They see us as condemning, and we want to say no. We live lives of grace. We want you to experience that same grace that we have experienced. But others of us are uncomfortable when we read that kind of blog because we kind of agree. For some of us sitting here today, some of those issues probably are barriers that we have experienced in our life of faith. They are questions that we wrestle with, whether personally or maybe because of our family and our friends, and how we have seen those things affecting them and affecting their walk of faith. And it's just frustrating and it's uncomfortable. But what I want to share this morning, what I'm hoping to share this morning is that I think there's hope for us as a community. I think there's hope for us as individuals, because I think that we have been taught sometimes a false dichotomy, a false distinction, where we think, they want us to be all loving, but we got to be truthful too. There is a way that we can bring them together. I know there is, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning. So we're going to be looking at the story of Zacchaeus, and I want you to know we are not going to be singing that song.
Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted.
Yeah, right, we weren't going to do that this morning, Steve. I don't know what that was about. There was a reason we weren't going to do that song this morning. And that's because this morning, we're going to be all about the outsider's perspective, the people who don't feel so much like they're comfortable when they're in this kind of space. We want to think about, how does the person who feels a little bit distant, how do they feel when they come in and we've got our inside music and our inside songs and our inside rules, and they just don't know what to do? And how can we help them? And how can we be more open and show that grace and that openness? So that was the object lesson. Let's go to the story. So, Luke 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. And when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." So let's look at our cast of characters here. The one that little song that some of us know from growing up introduces us to is Jesus and Zacchaeus as the two main players. So you have Jesus, he's a traveling teacher, healer, prophet, and at this point in the story, in the great big story of the New Testament, he has acquired a following. He's popular. People know about him. They want to go see, what weird thing is this guy going to say? What amazing thing is he going to do? And so the crowds come out because they want to see him. And then you have Zacchaeus, and he's a chief tax collector. And, I don't know if tax collectors are ever going to be popular people in any time or age, right? But he has a second mark against him because he's a chief tax collector in the service of the Romans, which means that to his Jewish brothers and sisters, he's a traitor. And, I think about that with Zacchaeus, and I think, he made that choice for himself, didn't he? And we all do that sometimes. We make choices that in retrospect we look back and we see how that put us outside the fold, how it distanced us from some of the people that we care about. And actually, he made even a worse choice, because as we're going to see as we go farther into the story, he wasn't even a fair tax collector. He used his position to steal and to take more money than was appropriate from his brothers and his sisters. And then, of course, there's a part that he couldn't control. He was short. I always think it's funny how they make such a big deal of that in this story. I mean, part of it is because that means he's got to climb the sycamore tree. It's kind of a funny little image. But I got to think that throughout his life, that was probably something, one of those things he had no control over, that kept him a little bit on the outside with other people. And I think we can all resonate with that too, right? With things about us that we never chose, and yet they cause difficulties for us sometimes in how we relate with other people. But there's a third main character in this story, and that's the one we're actually going to spend most of the time talking about this morning, and it's the crowd. There's a whole big crowd of people, and their main kind of plot point in the story, what they're doing, is they are trying to keep Zacchaeus away from Jesus. There's something in Zacchaeus that is so desperate. He so desperately wants to go and connect with Jesus, see him in some way, experience him. And then there's a crowd that's keeping him away. And when we first see the crowd, really they're not doing it on purpose, probably. They're just limited in their perspective. They're thinking, each of them individually, I want to go see Jesus. They're not thinking, well, is there anybody in the crowd who might be a little bit smaller? I might want to, make sure that they have the front seats. I think about that sometimes in the food distribution. We have this thing where we bring out a big thing of chairs because people are standing in line and they get tired. And every time we roll out this big cart of chairs, it's not like the people start looking around to go, who in the crowd is elderly and might want a seat? Who is pregnant and might want a seat? They just go grab their chairs. This is what's happening here. They're focused on what they need and what they want, and so they don't even see Zacchaeus in his desperation. And I wonder how often we do that sort of thing. We're just unaware. I started out in ministry almost 13 years ago now, and so in this past 13 years, I've just been so amazed by how often, just by asking a simple question, take one tiny little step, people really do have questions. They really do want to know Jesus. They want to talk with you about it. They want to share with you. I remember one time sitting down with this student I just met and him explaining to me how he was trying to fit Judaism, Christianity, and Wicca all together. They have thoughts. They're thinking about these things. But are we taking the time? Do we make time in our daily life to be there and to explore it with them? To give them that space? Or are we focusing on ourselves? I think about the Apostle Paul and his way of going about it. I mean, listen to this intensity and this intentionality. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. I have become all things to all people so that by all means possible, I might save some. His whole life is shaped by looking around. Who is there that I can help take a step closer to Jesus? What would that look like in our lives to be more aware like that? What would it be like for us as a church? I think sometimes there's this misconception that all of the church members, those who call New Life home, are honored guests, are the honored guests of the staff every Sunday morning as you come into worship. We are the hosts, and the church members are our honored guests. But that's not right. If you call New Life home, you're the host, and our honored guests are our honored guests. And we need you to help us look around and say, how can we help people be more comfortable? How can we help them get the best seats? How do we invite them in and make them know for sure that they're welcome? And I have to take a pause and tell you just one of the funniest, most embarrassing moments. Israel and I, probably like 10 years ago, we were baby newlyweds, no kids yet, and we just started here at New Life. And this wonderful woman, who will remain nameless, and don't try and figure out who she is, she wouldn't mind that I'm telling this story, but she gave us a call during the holiday season, and she invited us over for Christmas cookies. Said she made them every year. It was a big thing. Do we want to come over and eat Christmas cookies? I swear, that's all she said. We showed up like this, and there were men in ties and women in sequins. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was embarrassing. That's how some people feel when they walk into our doors, and we need to be aware of that. There are people who walk in feeling like, oh my gosh, what did I just step into? They feel wrong. But our host that afternoon, whenever it was, she didn't let us stay feeling wrong very long. She took us around and she introduced us to some other folks. And it was just a good time. There are things that we can do to help people feel more welcome and more included. Well, as the story progresses, we move from the crowd just being, not really aware, just kind of focused on their own self, their own things, to they actively have an issue with Zacchaeus. We move to that part of the story where they're looking at what's happening, and that Jesus has gone up, he's talked to Zacchaeus, he told Zacchaeus he wants to go home with him, and they pull out the S word. He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Now they really have a problem. Now they've moved from just, we're ignoring Zacchaeus, to we have a judgment to pronounce on him. We have judged him. We have found him guilty. He is a sinner. When I get to this part of the story, I start thinking, there are people who come up to me at different times, and they ask me when I might teach a course on something called apologetics. And for those of you who don't know what that is, apologetics is basically, it's kind of like when we take out and we study all the hard, tricky, intellectual questions that people might have about the faith. And we would talk about where those questions come from, and then I would provide you with some great answers to those questions so we could kind of defeat those challenges and those barriers to the faith for people where there is a barrier. And that's not a bad thing. It can be a good thing to talk about apologetics. But here's my issue. 95% of the time, maybe even more to like 98% of the time, when I am talking with someone who has questions about Christianity, and they have worries and doubts and concerns about Christianity, it has nothing to do with apologetics. Even sometimes if they start asking those kinds of questions, what about evolution, and what about, the historicity of the Bible, and all that kind of stuff, most of the time, if I dig just a little bit, their real issue, the real thing that is holding them back is a relationship, an interaction they had with someone who follows Jesus. Most of the time, what I tell people is that I don't think apologetics is the issue. It hasn't been a key tool, when I'm talking with people. Apologies have tended to be a lot more important, where I listen to the hurt that they've experienced. And on behalf of all of you, I say, I'm so sorry. That sucked. I don't think they meant it, but I'm so sorry. And that's how we get into the conversations. And that's how we make progress as we're talking. I don't think we mean to do it. Again, I think we get caught sometimes. We feel like, there's this truth and we have to defend it. And if we're too loving, we're going to stray away from the truth. And so we want to be so careful. We don't mean to hurt people. We feel caught. So I have a friend that I'm thinking a lot about this morning, and that's partly because she's in the hospital in labor right now, and so yay. She's probably not feeling so yay right this exact second. But a couple of weeks ago, she and I met to have coffee, wanted to get together one more time before her life changes, a little bit for another season. And one of the things that came up as we were talking, because we do a lot of doing life together, one of the things that came up was that she has a cousin who is planning her same-sex wedding coming up soon. And my friend was wrestling, what do I as a woman of faith do? Because I have this close cousin who is planning something that I don't agree with, and I don't want to be seen as condoning. That's one kind of situation. Here's another situation. You have a good friend who finds herself unexpectedly pregnant. Or maybe the pregnancy is expected, but they've just found out the child is going to be very ill. And she wants you to come with her to the clinic and hold her hand. Or maybe it's even in some ways easier. Maybe it's just the neighbor who just got a promotion at work. He wants to go celebrate at the bar down the street, and maybe that's not something that you personally feel comfortable with. What are you supposed to do in those situations? One of the things that I love about this friend as we were having coffee, one of the things that I love about her is that we talk and we wrestle together with the hard questions. And I hope that's what we're doing together this morning, that I haven't freaked anybody out thus far, but that you're sticking with me. We're just talking about some of those deep and hard questions that we all do think about. And I think most of us have people in our lives even who have brought these questions up for us. So here are some of the questions that I shared with her and some of the things that I think about and I wrestle with these kinds of situations. I think about, well, who did Jesus reserve his hardest questions for? Who did he really go and get in their face and say, you're sinning, stop it? As I read my Bible, and hey, go and look later, see what you think, it was the religious people. He didn't go up to the people who in some ways were outside the fold and do that. It was with the people who said, yeah, we're all in. We know how we're supposed to live. Those were the people that he came and said the hard things like, get behind me, Satan, you whitewashed grave. The other people, yeah, he would say things like, go and sin no more. But it was a different tone. It was in the context of relationship and grace. So who did Jesus really challenge? I think about what happens to this relationship if I don't show up in these moments. Other people are showing up. What happens if none of the Christians show up? If I'm not here in this big moment of their life, why are they going to let me into any of the other moments? I worry about that. What if we separate ourselves so far, we basically become useless? And what I finally come down to is, are these really our only options? Is the only option that we either condone something we see as sinful or we condemn it? That we be all love or all truth? Or can we be all of them together at the same time? And I want to argue that we can. We can do that. Because Jesus was the master of the third way. People were always giving him either or choices. Pick this or that. Which do you choose, Jesus? And he was the master at saying, neither. Let me show you the other option. And I love how he does that in this story. See, the crowd, they're self-focused. It's my way or the highway. I've got my agenda. You do what you need to do. Jesus goes out of his way to reach out to Zacchaeus. He initiates with him, and it's not to judge him, is it? It's to offer friendship. It's to say, let's have a meal together. And we worry sometimes, what if we do that kind of thing with someone who maybe we think is obviously in sin? They're going to think we're condoning it. Other people are going to see it and think we're condoning. Jesus doesn't seem to care that the crowd is saying that. The crowd is saying that. We do think Jesus is condoning that. He's going to be in the home of a sinner. He does it anyway. They are using the truth to condemn Zacchaeus, but Jesus, I don't know how else to put it except he is the truth. I mean, you go throughout that whole passage, he really never speaks words to Zacchaeus that enlighten him, that show him how to live a different way. There's just something about being in the very presence of Jesus, in the presence of truth itself, that ends up changing Zacchaeus. He is the truth, and he came to seek and to save the lost. How is he going to do that if he refuses to be in the presence of those who are actually lost? How would he do that? How could we do that? Some of you are probably thinking, okay, so you're telling me I should go to the wedding. You're telling me I have to go to the clinic. I have to go to the bar. And no, I'm actually not. I'm not actually that black and white of a thinker. I tend to live in the gray quite a bit. I'm saying that if we want to walk like Jesus, if we want to love like Jesus, somehow we have to be present. Somehow we have to value those relationships and being there in the lives of people. There are always going to be circumstances. There's going to be context. I can't give a blanket rule for what we have to do in every situation. I'm just saying that we can bring love and truth together when we're fully present with people, and we have to wrestle through what that's going to look like. And we're going to trust that there are great things that can happen, that life can come as we do that. I mean, really, aren't we all glad that Jesus is this way? That he doesn't insist that we be fixed before he comes into relationship with us? None of us would be in relationship with Jesus if we'd had to be perfect before he was willing to connect with us. Can't we all resonate with Zacchaeus? Look at this verse from Romans. God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Faith is a journey. We're all still on this journey. There's no one in this room who can tell me I've got it all figured out. My life totally squared away. So wherever you are in your journey this morning, we're on the same path. Jesus died for you. There's grace for you. Maybe some of you are feeling like, yeah, I don't know where I'm at. This is all new to me. There's something in me that wanted to come this morning. There's something in me that's a little curious, a little bit drawn to Jesus of Nazareth, but it's all really new. Don't rush me. And I want to tell you, there's no rush. It's a journey. We're all on that journey together. Others of you have been on the journey for a while, and there's still pockets in your life where you need to hear the gospel. This is one of my favorite quotes. There's still parts of my own heart that have yet to hear the gospel, and that changes how I relate to people who are way back at the beginning of the journey, because I can come alongside them and say, I get it, me too. I still have my pockets of confusion. I still have my pockets of doubt. I still have my pockets of sin that I'm dealing with, and I live by grace, and I can give that grace to you. We're all on the same journey. So, the end of the story. Can you imagine? Zacchaeus brings Jesus home, and they're looking around. And I've just got to think Zacchaeus is looking at the place with new eyes, because Jesus is there. I mean, don't you do that? It's like when you have people coming over. All of a sudden, what seemed clean and tidy, you're like, oh shoot, I gotta clean up. You see your house with different eyes. He's looking around, and he's seeing with Jesus' eyes just because he's there. And so not because of any external expectation, but because of a changed heart. He wants to be different. And he tells Jesus that, and he makes these beautiful promises of wanting to change and make restitution to the people that he's wronged. And Jesus, in the way he responds, acknowledges the fact that he gets it. It's not just a behavior thing. It's a heart thing. It's an identity thing. So Jesus affirms Zacchaeus' new identity. He says, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. He's a son. The guy who at the beginning of the story is an outcast. He has to climb a tree to get anywhere close to Jesus. He's been fully restored. He's a son in the community. And that's what Jesus came for. He came to seek and to save the lost. He came to seek and save all of us. And he invites us to be part of this kingdom community and to take the same mission, to do the same work that he came to do. So this morning, I'm going to pray for you, and then you're going to have a few minutes just to pray and to respond in your own heart. And here are some things that you might think about. Where is God calling you or us as a congregation just to be more present, to figure out how to bring truth and love together in life-changing ways? But maybe the question that you want to talk about with God this morning is more that of personal transformation. Like Zacchaeus, you kind of want to take a mental tour of your life, trying to see it through Jesus' eyes. Where does he want to bring change, and will you let him? Let me pray for you this morning, and you're going to have a few minutes for quiet reflection. God, I love your heart for those who are far off, for those who sometimes feel like outcasts, for those who know that they're sinners and they're broken, because I don't know where I would be if you weren't that kind of God. Thank you for Jesus, for the example he sets, for the life that he breathes into us. Thank you that you're here with us in this moment as we deal with questions in your presence.